20 black actors who were constantly mocked for their acting, but still became stars. One was told he'd never make it past the comedy club stage. Another was compared to a lifeless mannequin. One survived foster care, homelessness, and sleeping in her car, just to be told she was too loud to be taken seriously. These are not fictional characters. These are real people, real rejection, real pain, and every single one of them went on to build legacies that their critics could never touch. Tonight, on Black Excellence Legends, we're counting down 20 black actors who were mocked, dismissed, and laughed at until the world had no choice but to laugh with them. This is not just a Hollywood story. This is a story about every one of us who has ever been told we don't belong. Tyler Perry. Before Tyler Perry was a billionaire, he was a man sleeping in his car. Born Emmett Perry Jr. on September 13, 1969, in New Orleans, Louisiana, Tyler grew up in a home fractured by poverty and his father's physical abuse. By his early 20s, he had channeled that pain into a stage play, pouring every last dollar he had into a production he believed the world needed to see. The world disagreed. His 1992 debut drew only about 30 people. He went bankrupt. He spent stretches living out of his vehicle, surviving on instant noodles, writing the next script in the margins of whatever paper he could find. When he created Medea, the fierce, Bible-carrying grandmother who refused to be silenced, the mainstream press refused to take him seriously. Critics labeled his work minstrelsy, calling it a shallow recycling of black stereotypes. Hollywood gatekeepers didn't return calls. Major studios treated him like a curiosity, not a filmmaker. But the audience told a different story. Black theatergoers lined up around the block. His touring stage productions generated revenues that rivaled concert tours by artists of Beyoncé's caliber. When he broke into film, critics doubled down. Diary of a Mad Black Woman, 2005, was savaged by reviewers and still opened to $21.9 million in its first weekend on a budget of just $5.5 million. His films routinely cleared $100 million worldwide, not because critics changed their minds, because millions of ordinary people saw their own lives reflected on screen for the very first time. In 2019, Perry opened Tyler Perry Studios, a 330-acre film and television complex built on the former grounds of a Confederate Army base in Atlanta. No outside investors, no studio partners, fully self-owned. His net worth is estimated at $1 billion. He has written, directed, produced, and starred in over 20 films and more than 20 television series, employing hundreds of people and anchoring Atlanta as a major American production hub. The most remarkable detail? Every single dollar in that empire traces back to a man who was once told, loudly and repeatedly, that he had no place in entertainment. Tyler Perry didn't just prove the critics wrong. He built a studio on the very ground of history's cruelest chapter and turned it into something that uplifts. That is not just success. That is transformation. Kevin Hart. The first time Kevin Hart performed stand-up comedy in front of a real audience, he was booed off the stage. Objects were thrown. He was escorted out by security. Born Kevin Darnell Hart on July 6, 1979, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he grew up in North Philadelphia without a stable father figure. His dad, Henry Witherspoon, battled cocaine addiction and was in and out of prison throughout Kevin's childhood. His mother, Nancy Hart, raised Kevin and his older brother Robert alone while working as a systems analyst at the University of Pennsylvania. Kevin was physically small, economically small, and the city made sure he felt both. His early career gave critics plenty of ammunition. Roles in Soul Plane, 2004, and Scary Movie 3, 2003, were dismissed as loud, empty, and formulaic. He screams, he runs, he falls down, was the general consensus. One reviewer flatly stated he lacked the substance to carry a film. His stand-up specials were seen as one-note, too self-deprecating, too reliant on energy over intelligence. What those critics missed was the architecture underneath the noise. Hart was studying his audiences with the discipline of a scientist. He built a self-deprecating style that was deeply personal, mining his own insecurities, his absent father, his height, his mistakes, and audiences responded because they felt the truth in it. He wasn't performing pain, he was sharing it. By the early 2000s, his stand-up tours were selling out arenas of 20,000 seats. His 2015 comedy special, What Now?, was filmed at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, a venue that seats over 65,000 people, making it one of the largest stand-up events in history. His films, including Ride Along, 2014, $154 million worldwide, and Central Intelligence, 2016, $217 million worldwide, proved he could anchor a franchise. Forbes listed Hart among the world's highest-paid entertainers multiple times throughout the 2000s. He founded Laugh Out Loud Network, a global comedy media company. The critics who once called him a one-trick act now find themselves writing about a man worth an estimated $200 million. Kevin Hart's story is a reminder that the people who laugh at your beginning rarely get to understand your ending. Taraji P. Henson. Taraji P. Henson grew up in Washington, D.C., in a working-class household where no one told her she was going to be a movie star, because nobody thought she would be. Born Taraji Penda Henson on September 11, 1970, she studied acting at Howard University, where she balanced coursework with multiple jobs to pay her tuition as a single mother. She entered Hollywood not through a lucky break, but through relentless grinding, taking supporting roles, small parts, background work, whatever kept her in the room. For years, those rooms were small. She was cast as the best friend, the sassy neighbor, the angry woman in the background. Her role in Baby Boy, 2001, was critically noted, but the note was a trap. It locked her into the angry black woman archetype, a label that followed her for nearly a decade. Directors saw the character, not the actress. Auditions led to the same narrow corridor of roles. Even after her Academy Award-nominated performance as Queenie in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, 2008, a physically and emotionally demanding role opposite Brad Pitt, the skepticism barely softened. Critics acknowledged the performance but questioned whether it was a fluke, whether she had the range, whether she could sustain it. The answer came in 2015 when Empire premiered on Fox. Her portrayal of Cookie Lyon, a woman who spent 17 years in prison, emerged with her hunger intact and proceeded to reclaim everything that had been taken from her, was an earthquake. Audiences watched in disbelief. Critics scrambled to update their assessments. The show's season 1 finale drew 16.7 million viewers, one of the highest-rated drama finales in a decade. Cookie Lyon became an instant cultural icon. Henson went on to star in Hidden Figures, 2016, playing real-life NASA mathematician Katherine Johnson in a film that earned 3 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. In 2025, she headlined Tyler Perry's Straw on Netflix, demonstrating a depth that continues to evolve. She founded the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, named for her late father, to address mental health stigma in the Black community. It has provided over $1 million in scholarships and mental health support. Taraji P. Henson is proof that the label someone else puts on you is only as permanent as your willingness to accept it. She never did. Gabrielle Union. Gabrielle Union walked into Hollywood with perfect bone structure and was immediately told that was all she had. Born Gabrielle Monique Union on October 29, 1972, in Omaha, Nebraska, and raised in Pleasanton, California, Union transitioned from modeling into acting in the mid-1990s. Her early appearances in films like She's All That, 1999, and 10 Things I Hate About You, 1999, typecast her almost immediately. Beautiful face, minimal dialogue, decorative presence. Critics and casting directors looked right through her. The mockery sharpened when she attempted leading roles. In The Brothers, 2001, and Deliver Us from Eva, 2003, critics argued she lacked comic timing, screen magnetism, and the ineffable quality that separates a star from a pretty face. Some entertainment writers suggested she should lean into supporting roles or, astonishingly, marry well. One critic unfavorably compared her to Halle Berry, suggesting she was attempting to be a lesser imitation of someone else's original. What those critics ignored was the discipline she was building behind the scenes. Her role in Bring It On, 2000, has aged into a cult classic, not despite her performance, but because of it. She brought intelligence and comic edge to a character that could have been a cardboard villain, and audiences remembered her long after the film ended. The movie grossed $90.4 million worldwide on a budget of $11 million. Her range expanded significantly with Birth of a Nation, 2016, where she played a survivor of sexual violence with devastating restraint, a performance that required her to draw on her own real-life trauma, which she had publicly disclosed in her memoir, We're Going to Need More Wine, 2017. The book became a New York Times bestseller. Union also established herself as a producer, creating her own opportunities rather than waiting for Hollywood's permission. She starred in and produced the BET series Being Mary Jane from 2013 to 2019, which drew millions of viewers and became one of the network's most critically praised shows. Gabrielle Union's journey is a quiet lesson in patience and self-authorship. When the industry writes you a small role in its story, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is write your own. Michael B. Jordan. Michael B. Jordan was once compared to a mannequin, lifeless, unconvincing, a pretty face occupying space. Born Michael Bakari Jordan on February 9, 1987, in Santa Ana, California, and raised in Newark, New Jersey, Jordan began acting as a child, appearing in commercials before landing early television roles. His work in All My Children drew criticism for being stiff and emotionally flat. His role as Wallace in The Wire, a sensitive, doomed teenager swallowed by Baltimore street violence, was criticized for being too soft for the harsh environment it depicted. Critics wanted grit. They saw a boy. The attacks intensified when he was cast as Johnny Storm/Human Torch in Fantastic Four, 2015, a role that had previously been portrayed by a white actor. Social media erupted. The film was a critical and commercial disaster, earning only $56 million against a $120 million budget, and Jordan absorbed much of the public vitriol, despite the fact that the script, not the casting, was the film's fatal flaw. Then came Ryan Coogler. Their first collaboration, Fruitvale Station, 2013, won the Grand Jury Prize in the Audience Award at Sundance. Their second, Creed, 2015, changed everything. As Adonis Creed, the son of legendary Apollo Creed, Jordan didn't just act, he transformed. He trained for months with professional boxers, building a physique and a physicality that were completely convincing. More importantly, he portrayed grief, ambition, and vulnerability with a layered authenticity that no critic could dismiss. Creed earned $173 million worldwide. Sylvester Stallone received an Oscar nomination. Jordan himself was inexplicably overlooked, a slight that only underscored how far Hollywood's biases still ran. He continued with Black Panther, 2018, playing Eric Killmonger in what many consider one of the greatest villain performances in Marvel history. The film grossed $1.347 billion worldwide. In 2022, Creed III, which Jordan also directed, grossed $275 million globally. He is now one of the most bankable and respected actors in Hollywood. the mannequin grew a soul. He built it himself, roll by roll, brick by brick, in a system designed to see him as set dressing. Monique. Monique didn't break into Hollywood. She shouldered her way in, and they tried to close the door behind her every single time. Born Monique Angela Hicks on December 11, 1967, in Woodlawn, Maryland, she began performing stand-up comedy in Baltimore clubs in the late 1980s, venues where audiences were unforgiving and laughs were never given freely. Her style was unapologetic, big personality, blunt honesty, subjects that polished comedians avoided. She talked about body image, race, sex, and pain with a directness that made rooms uncomfortable, and then, a second later, erupted with laughter. The entertainment industry's response was to minimize her. When she joined the cast of The Parkers, 1999 to 2004, a UPN sitcom that ran for 110 episodes, critics dismissed her character, Nikki Parker, as a cartoonish reinforcement of negative black female stereotypes. The show was called Lowest Common Denominator Television. The fact that The Parkers consistently drew 6 to 7 million viewers per episode, making it one of the most watched shows on its network, was treated as evidence of audience bad taste, not of Monique's genuine connection with real people. Films like Soul Plane, 2004, and Fat Girls, 2006, were used to build a case against her, that she was a one-dimensional performer suited only for broad physical comedy, incapable of dramatic depth. Several entertainment writers publicly advised her to stay in stand-up and stop attempting film. Then, in 2009, director Lee Daniels offered her the role of Mary Lee Johnston in Precious, an abusive, monstrous mother who inflicts unimaginable cruelty on her own child. It was the opposite of every role she had ever played. She took it without hesitation. What followed was one of the most devastating performances in modern American cinema. Monique disappeared into that character, finding her humanity without excusing her evil, locating the broken child inside the monstrous adult. She made audiences weep and recoil simultaneously. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 2010. In her speech, she thanked the Academy for showing that it can be about the performance and not the politics. One sentence, it said everything. When an industry spends 20 years underestimating you, winning its highest honor is not the end of the story. It is the loudest possible middle chapter. Tracy Morgan. Tracy Morgan has never been easy to categorize. That was exactly the problem, and exactly the point. Born Tracy Jamal Morgan on November 10, 1968, in the Bronx, New York, he grew up in the Tompkins Houses public housing project in Brooklyn. His father served in Vietnam and returned with PTSD and drug addiction. He died of AIDS-related illness in 1987, when Tracy was just 18. Morgan turned to comedy not as a career plan, but as a survival mechanism, something to keep the darkness from winning. His early stand-up work was labeled unstable. Critics found his energy erratic, his pacing uneven, his material too raw and too personal. When he joined the cast of Saturday Night Live in 1996, becoming only the third black cast member in the show's history at that point, the skepticism metastasized. Critics called him a faulty Eddie Murphy, too loud, too unpredictable, lacking the sharpness the show required. His sketches received inconsistent reviews, and his name became associated with the show's weaker segments. What those critics read as deficiency was actually a very rare form of honesty. Tracy Morgan has never performed a version of himself designed for comfort. He brings chaos, vulnerability, and genuine unpredictability to everything he does. And for audiences who could feel the difference between authentic and performed, it was electric. His role as Tracy Jordan in 30 Rock, the absurdist, lovable, completely unhinged celebrity played opposite Tina Fey, became one of the most beloved comic performances on American television. The show ran from 2006 to 2013, winning numerous Emmy and Golden Globe Awards. Tracy's character became iconic precisely because of the qualities critics once mocked: the wildness, the non sequiturs, the sense that anything could happen next. On June 7, 2014, a Walmart truck driver who had been awake for 28 hours struck Morgan's limousine van on the New Jersey Turnpike. His friend and fellow comedian James McNair was killed. Morgan suffered a traumatic brain injury, a broken leg, broken ribs, and a broken nose. GJ spent months in rehabilitation. He returned GJL as host in October 2015 to a standing ovation. He returned to television with The Last OG in 2018. Tracy Morgan's resilience is not metaphorical. It is literal, written in scar tissue and survival. He is proof that being irreplaceable has nothing to do with being convenient. Tay Diggs. Tay Diggs had the kind of face that Hollywood loves to use and refuses to take seriously, simultaneously. Born Scott Leo Diggs on January 2, 1971, in Rochester, New York, Diggs trained rigorously at Syracuse University's prestigious musical theater program before cutting his teeth on Broadway. He originated the role of Benny in Rent, one of the most celebrated musicals in Broadway history, and brought technical precision and emotional range to a complex, morally ambiguous character. By any craft standard, he was a serious stage actor before he ever set foot in a Hollywood audition room. Hollywood didn't see a stage actor, it saw a set of cheekbones. His early film roles in How Stella Got Her Groove Back, 1998, and The Best Man, 1999, both commercially successful films, were dismissed by critics as romantic wallpaper. One critic wrote that his primary acting skill appeared to be looking good while shirtless. His Broadway training, his vocal abilities, his years of physical and emotional discipline, none of it entered the conversation. He was beautiful, therefore he was shallow. It was that simple and that unfair. The mockery intensified during the mid-2000s, when he appeared in a series of romantic comedies that critics labeled formulaic. They weren't wrong that some of the scripts were thin, but they directed their frustration at Diggs rather than at the material he was handed. The subtext was unmistakable. A handsome black actor in romantic comedies was treated as a lesser artistic species. His work in the long-running ABC medical drama Private Practice, 2007 to 2013, where he played Dr. Sam Bennett for 6 seasons, forced a partial reassessment. The character required emotional complexity, moral reckoning, and sustained dramatic presence over 111 episodes. Critics who caught up to it acknowledged he had more range than they'd credited him with. More recent roles in All-American and various dramatic projects have continued to reshape the narrative. But Diggs has spent close to 3 decades fighting a perception created not by his talent, but by his appearance. A reminder that in Hollywood, beauty can be as limiting as any other label if the industry decides to stop there. Whoopi Goldberg. When Steven Spielberg cast Whoopi Goldberg in The Color Purple in 1985, the backlash was immediate and vicious. Born Karen Elaine Johnson on November 13, 1955, in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan, Goldberg grew up in a New York City Housing Authority project, raised by her mother after her father left the family. She struggled with dyslexia as a child, dropped out of high school, and spent years performing in small theater companies before developing the one-woman show that would change her life. Her stand-up was unlike anything American comedy had seen. Fully realized characters, a surfer girl, a Jamaican woman, a young black girl who dreamed of being white, that examined race, class, gender, and survival with devastating honesty and dark humor. She made audiences laugh until the laughter turned into something else entirely. She was radical, and she was a stranger to Hollywood's beauty standards, its glamour codes, its expectations of what a leading woman should look like. When Spielberg announced her casting in The Color Purple, an adaptation of Alice Walker's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, the industry recoiled. Who was this unknown comedian? She lacked the look, the training, the name. She was mocked for her stage name, her appearance, her directness. Critics predicted disaster. Her performance as Celie, a black woman who absorbs decades of abuse, oppression, and erasure and somehow keeps the seed of selfhood alive, was one of the most emotionally devastating debut film performances in American history. She received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. The film earned 11 Oscar nominations in total. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for Ghost in 1991, playing psychic Oda Mae Brown. With that win, she became only the second black woman in history to win an acting Oscar, following Hattie McDaniel in 1940. She went further. Whoopi Goldberg holds the EGOT, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, making her one of fewer than 20 people in history to achieve all four. She is the first black woman to do so. She hosted the Academy Awards 4 times. She has used her platform to advocate for HIV/AIDS awareness, LGBTQ+ rights, and racial justice for decades. The woman they said didn't fit the mold ended up redefining what the mold was. That is not irony, that is justice. Martin Lawrence. Martin Lawrence arrived in Hollywood loud, unfiltered, and absolutely certain of who he was, which was precisely what made so many people uncomfortable. Born Martin Fitzgerald Lawrence on April 16, 1965, in Frankfurt, West Germany, where his father was stationed as a U.S. Air Force serviceman, Lawrence grew up in Landover, Maryland, after his parents divorced. He was drawn to comedy early, a sharp, rapid-fire style that drew on black urban life with a specificity that mainstream critics found either thrilling or alienating, with very little middle ground. His stand-up drew mixed notices. Critics at prestige outlets labeled him unsophisticated, accusing his material of relying on volume and crude observation rather than structural wit. When his sitcom, Martin, premiered on Fox in 1992, the critical response was withering. Lowest common denominator entertainment, a parade of stereotypes, noise masquerading as comedy. What critics could not account for was the show's massive cultural footprint. Martin ran for 5 seasons, averaged over 6 million viewers per episode, and launched catchphrases and character archetypes that are still referenced in black cultural conversation more than 30 years later. His film career faced the same wall. House Party, 1990, and Boomerang, 1992, were dismissed as shallow, and critics frequently suggested he was an inferior Eddie Murphy, a comparison Lawrence addressed directly in interviews. "I'm not trying to be Eddie, I'm trying to be Martin." The turning point came in 1995 with Bad Boys, directed by Michael Bay, co-starring Will Smith. The film grossed $141.4 million worldwide on a $19 million budget. It became one of the defining action comedies of the decade and launched a franchise that has now earned over $800 million globally across 4 films. Lawrence wasn't the sidekick, he was the co-lead, and he matched Will Smith beat for beat. Martin Lawrence may not have the Oscar, but he has the longevity, the box office, and the loyalty of an audience that saw themselves in him when Hollywood offered them almost nothing else. That kind of love doesn't come from critics, it comes from truth. Cuba Gooding Jr. Cuba Gooding Jr.'s career is one of Hollywood's most complicated cautionary tales, and one of its most misunderstood ones. Born Cuba Mark Gooding Jr. on January 2, 1968, in the Bronx, New York, he grew up in Los Angeles after his father, Cuba Gooding Sr., the lead singer of The Main Ingredient, abandoned the family when Cuba was young. He began acting in his late teens, taking small television roles before landing the part that would define and haunt him simultaneously. His role as Trey Styles in John Singleton's Boys in the Hood, 1991, was emotionally precise and deeply felt. His performance in Jerry Maguire, 1996, as Rod Tidwell, the wide receiver who demands to be seen, to be paid, to be valued, won him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. His acceptance speech, an ecstatic, full-body eruption of gratitude that lasted nearly 4 minutes, became one of the most replayed moments in Oscar history. He was 28 years old. The world was his. What followed is a lesson in how quickly Hollywood can withdraw what it offers. A series of miscast roles: Chill Factor, 1999, Snow Dogs, 2002, Boat Trip, 2002, Daddy Day Camp, 2007, eroded the goodwill. Critics were savage. His name became internet shorthand for Oscar curse, the phenomenon of award-winning actors making inexplicably poor career choices afterward. The jokes were merciless. But here's what the jokes missed. Cuba Gooding Jr. never stopped working. While the spotlight moved elsewhere, he quietly delivered genuinely strong performances in Radio, 2003, Red Tails, 2012, and American Crime Story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, 2016, where his portrayal of O.J. Simpson earned him both Emmy and Screen Actors Guild nominations. An Oscar does not insulate you from Hollywood's indifference. Cuba Gooding Jr. learned that lesson at great cost. His story is a reminder that the entertainment industry is not a meritocracy, but that talent, when it is real, has a way of surfacing again and again, even when everything else conspires against it. Jaden Smith. Jaden Smith grew up inside one of the most visible spotlights in American entertainment, and it nearly swallowed him whole. Born Jaden Christopher Sire Smith on July 8, 1998, in Malibu, California, he is the son of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. By the time he was 7 years old, he had appeared on film alongside his father in The Pursuit of Happiness, 2006, a performance of such raw, unguarded emotion that audiences wept and critics took notice. He was a child actor doing something that most adults struggle to achieve: being completely, unconditionally present. Then came the pressure of carrying a film. The Karate Kid, 2010, in which he starred opposite Jackie Chan, grossed $359 million worldwide, a genuine commercial triumph. But critics, and increasingly the internet, had already decided something. Jaden Smith was a product of nepotism, not talent. The film's success was attributed to the franchise, the co-star, the nostalgia factor, anything but the young actor at its center. After Earth, 2013, co-starring and produced by his father, was a catastrophe. It earned just $60 million against a $130 million budget, was torn apart by critics, and Jaden's performance, emotionally flat under director M. Night Shyamalan's deliberately muted direction, became the target of widespread mockery. Jaden Smith cannot act became a cultural shorthand, and it hardened into something that followed him through his 20s, regardless of what he actually did. The memes were relentless. His philosophical tweets, "How can mirrors be real if our eyes aren't real?" and others, became punchlines. His gender-fluid fashion choices, including wearing a Louis Vuitton women's wear campaign and a Batman costume to Kim Kardashian's wedding, made him a tabloid fixture. But here is what the mockery missed. Jaden was carving out a genuine artistic identity entirely outside his father's shadow. His debut album, Sire, 2017, received strong critical reviews. His music has accumulated hundreds of millions of streams. He co-founded the water company Just Water at age 11, which is now sold in over 8,000 retail locations globally, and has donated over 500,000 liters of clean water to Flint, Michigan. The child they laughed at built a life that deserves to be taken seriously, on his own terms, in his own time. Tiffany Haddish. There is almost no version of Tiffany Haddish's life that ends here. She has survived things that would have ended most people's stories decades earlier. Born Tiffany Haddish on December 3, 1979, in Los Angeles, California, she entered the foster care system at age 12 after her mother suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. She spent years in group homes and with foster families, aging out of the system at 18 with almost nothing. She was briefly homeless in her early 20s, living out of her car while performing stand-up at comedy clubs for audiences who weren't ready for her yet. Early critics weren't kind. Her small television appearances, That's So Raven, My Name is Earl, If Loving You Is Wrong, were dismissed as ghetto comedy, with critics arguing she was reinforcing negative stereotypes about Black women through her loud, unfiltered delivery. When she appeared in the action comedy Keanu, 2016, reviews called her performance over the top and scene-stealing in the most exhausting way possible. Several entertainment writers suggested she dial herself down to be taken seriously. Then came Girls Trip, 2017. Tiffany Haddish as Dina, the wildest, most uncontrollable member of a group of college friends reuniting in New Orleans, was an explosion of comedic energy that left audiences gasping. The film grossed $115 million worldwide on a budget of just $19 million. Her raw watermelon scene became one of the most discussed comedic moments of the decade. Critics who had once dismissed her scrambled to write glowing retrospectives. She hosted Saturday Night Live in November 2017 and delivered a monologue about her childhood in foster care and group homes that silenced the studio audience. Not from discomfort, from recognition. She made the audience feel something they hadn't expected to feel. She became the first Black female stand-up comedian to win the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album in 2018 for She Ready, From the Hood to Hollywood. Tiffany Haddish is living proof that being told to quiet down is sometimes the worst advice anyone can give a person. Ice Cube. When Ice Cube walked onto a film set for the first time, nobody in Hollywood believed he belonged there. Born O'Shea Jackson on June 15, 1969, in Baldwin Hills, Los Angeles, he had already rewritten the rules of American music as a founding member of NWA, the group whose 1988 album, Straight Outta Compton, is widely credited with launching gangsta rap and permanently altering the cultural landscape. By the time he appeared as Doughboy in John Singleton's Boys in the Hood, 1991, he was a cultural lightning rod, celebrated in some quarters, feared and condemned in others. Critics watching Boys in the Hood were divided. Some acknowledged his natural screen presence and emotional authenticity. Others dismissed his performance as a rapper playing himself, suggesting the role had been written to flatter rather than challenge him, and that his acting was really just an extension of his public persona. The question underlying all of it was unspoken but unmistakable. Can a man like this actually act? The answer arrived across 2 decades of work. Friday, 1995, which Ice Cube wrote and starred in, became a genuine cultural institution, spawning 2 sequels and launching the careers of several actors. Three Kings, 1999, put him in an ensemble alongside George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg and proved he could hold his own in serious dramatic material. Barbershop, 2002, grossed $75.8 million domestically and showcased his ability to carry a community-grounded ensemble comedy with warmth and precision. Hip-hop fans accused him of selling out when he transitioned to family comedies like Are We There Yet? 2005. Critics continued to discount him. Neither side gave him credit for what he was actually building, a complete, multi-dimensional entertainment career. His executive producer credit on Straight Outta Compton, 2015, a film about NWA's origin story, brought it full circle. The film grossed $201 million worldwide and earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Ice Cube did not make that film to prove a point. He made it to tell the truth. The fact that it silenced a generation of doubters was simply a bonus. Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon has been underestimated so consistently for so long that it has almost become a genre. Born Nicholas Scott Cannon on October 8, 1980, in San Diego, California, he began performing stand-up comedy as a teenager, becoming one of the youngest performers ever to appear on the Laugh Factory stage at age 11. His style was warm, clean, and crowd-friendly, the kind of comedy that makes everyone in the room feel safe, which is actually an incredibly difficult thing to achieve and an equally difficult thing to get critics to respect. The mockery started early. When his self-titled variety show premiered on Nickelodeon in 2002, critics called it shallow, toothless, and age-inappropriate in the wrong direction. Too childish for young adults, too energetic for children. It was canceled after one season. The entertainment press concluded he was a passing novelty. His early films reinforced the narrative. Drumline, 2002, was a box office success, $56 million worldwide, but critics argued he was playing a version of himself. Love Don't Cost a Thing, 2003, was dismissed as a forgettable teen comedy. The consensus forming around him was reductive and stubborn. Nick Cannon is corny. What that consensus failed to account for was his longevity. He hosted America's Got Talent on NBC from 2009 to 2016. 7 seasons, one of the most watched summer competition shows in American television, regularly drawing 10 to 12 million viewers per episode. His ability to connect with demographically diverse live audiences, to sustain energy across marathon tapings, and to navigate the unpredictability of live television is a skill set that very few performers possess. His improv comedy competition show, Wild 'N Out, which premiered on MTV2 in 2005, is still running, making it one of the longest-running hip-hop comedy shows in television history. Over 20 seasons, hundreds of episodes, an alumni list that includes some of the biggest names in contemporary comedy and music. Nick Cannon laughed last. He just did it on his own timeline. Brandy Norwood. Brandy Norwood entered Hollywood carrying a gift that became her greatest obstacle. The world already knew her as something else. Born Brandy Rayana Norwood on February 11, 1979, in Macomb, Mississippi, and raised in Carson, California, she became a music star at 15 when her self-titled debut album went platinum 4 times. Her voice was extraordinary, technically precise, emotionally open, capable of runs and riffs that placed her in the conversation alongside Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey. She was a teenager with a 40-year-old's instrument, but Hollywood saw a pop star playing dress-up. When she launched the sitcom Moesha on UPN in 1996, critics gave the show a grudging pass for its cultural relatability, while consistently suggesting that Brandy herself lacked the acting depth to be taken seriously. The show ran for 6 seasons and over 127 episodes. It was one of the most watched Black-led sitcoms of the 1990s. None of that shifted the critical narrative. Her film appearances deepened the skepticism. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, 1998, cast her in a horror sequel that critics demolished. And her performance, which required navigating genuine fear without the scaffolding of strong writing, was called stiff and expressionless. Some writers genuinely advised her to return to music and stop testing the limits of her abilities. What they missed was persistence. Her role as Cinderella in the 1997 Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella television special, opposite Whitney Houston, who played her fairy godmother, was watched by 60 million viewers, making it one of the most watched television events of 1997. She wasn't acting stiff, she was luminous. Her return to complex dramatic television in the BET series Queens, 2021 to 2022, earned genuine critical praise for the first time in years. Reviewers noting her emotional range, her physical authority, and a maturity in her performance that the early years had promised, but never been given room to deliver. Brandy Norwood's story is a reminder that the world's failure to see you clearly is not evidence of your limitations. It is evidence of theirs. Raven-Symoné. Raven-Symoné grew up in public, and the public grew up deciding what she was before she had the chance to figure it out herself. Born Raven-Symoné Christina Pierman on December 10, 1985, in Atlanta, Georgia, she began her career at age 3 as a model and at age 4 as Olivia Kendall on The Cosby Show, charming, instinctive, and completely at ease in front of a camera before most children can tie their shoes. She was, by any measure, a child prodigy. But growing up on television means your mistakes are archived, your awkward phases are documented, and your evolution is compared not to normal human development, but to a fixed idea of who you were at age 5. Critics covered her transitions not with curiosity, but with judgment. When she moved into music in the early 1990s, recording pop and R&B under MCA Records before she was in middle school, the response was warm but patronizing. Cute, precocious, not serious. The real backlash came with That's So Raven, the Disney Channel series that premiered in 2003 and ran for 4 seasons and 100 episodes. The show averaged 20 million viewers per episode at its peak, making it Disney Channel's highest-rated series at the time. But critics dismissed it as slapstick for the preteen set and labeled Raven a one-note performer, physically broad, emotionally shallow, unsuitable for anything beyond children's entertainment. The label stuck. Her subsequent films, The Cheetah Girls, 2003, College Road Trip, 2008, were commercial successes and critical eye rolls. When she joined the daytime talk panel on The View in 2015, the criticism broadened from her acting to her intellect, her opinions, her personal life. She had grown up. The audience hadn't caught up. Raven's Home, the continuation of That's So Raven that premiered on Disney Channel in 2017, has now aired over 100 episodes across multiple seasons and continues to draw strong ratings. It is not a nostalgia act. It is a woman who knows her craft, plays to her audience, and has sustained a career across 5 decades in the public eye. That is not luck. That is mastery. Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard is the kind of actor who makes critics uncomfortable, not because he is bad, but because he refuses to be easy. Born Terrence Deshawn Howard on March 11, 1969, in Chicago, Illinois, he grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in circumstances shadowed by his family's complicated history. He studied chemical engineering at Pratt Institute before abandoning academia for acting, a decision that gave his approach to performance a quality of intellectual rigor that most of his contemporaries never developed. From his earliest television work in the early 1990s, critics noted something unusual. Howard performed as though he was operating on a frequency slightly removed from everyone else in the scene. Some called it aloofness. Others called it staginess, a tendency to deliver lines with a precision that felt calculated rather than felt. The criticism of being too polished is a strange one, but it followed Howard for years. His role as DJ in Hustle and Flow, 2005, a Memphis pimp with dreams of making it as a rapper, was expected to silence the doubters. It did, partially. He received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. But even then, skeptics questioned whether the nomination reflected the competitive landscape of that year, rather than an unqualified endorsement of his talent. He was nominated. He did not win. The conversation moved on quickly. He entered the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Lieutenant James "Rhodey" Rhodes in Iron Man, 2008, a casting that generated genuine audience enthusiasm. Then he was replaced by Don Cheadle for Iron Man 2, 2010. The official explanation cited contract disputes. The internet interpreted it as confirmation that Howard lacked the star power to hold a franchise role. Anthony Anderson. For most of his career, Anthony Anderson was the funniest person in the room, and the last one anyone expected to carry a scene that required more than laughs. Born Anthony Anderson on August 15, 1970, in Compton, California, he grew up in Los Angeles and attended Howard University's Fine Arts program, the same school that shaped Taraji P. Henson's foundational training. He began his career in stand-up before transitioning to television and film in the mid-1990s, quickly establishing a reputation as the dependable supporting player who elevated every project he joined. But dependable supporting player became a cage. His early film credits, Barbershop, 2002, Scary Movie 3, 2003, Kangaroo Jack, 2003, established him as the loud physical comedian who arrived to generate laughs and step aside for the leads. Critics noted his energy approvingly, but questioned his range. His larger roles in forgettable comedies like Johnson Family Vacation, 2004, and Transformers, 2007, reinforced the perception that he was choosing paychecks over substance. When Blackish was announced in 2014, with Anderson cast as the lead, the skepticism was audible. Could the barbershop guy carry a network sitcom that intended to address race, class, identity, and the Black middle-class experience with both comedy and genuine emotional weight? The doubters were vocal and specific. Anderson wasn't sophisticated enough, wasn't subtle enough, lacked the dramatic range the concept required. Blackish premiered on ABC in September 2014 and became one of the most critically praised and culturally significant sitcoms of the decade. It ran for 8 seasons in 172 episodes, earning 67 Emmy Award nominations over its run, including 6 for Anderson himself as lead actor. The show addressed police brutality, the 2016 election, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the legacy of slavery with an honesty rarely seen in network primetime. Anderson made audiences laugh, then made them think, then made them feel something they couldn't easily name. He also works extensively as a producer, casting director, and mentor for young Black performers. The man they underestimated built a room, and then invited everyone inside. Lena Waithe. Lena Waithe didn't wait for Hollywood's permission. She walked in before they were ready. Born Lena Waithe on May 17, 1984, in Chicago, Illinois, she grew up on the South Side, raised largely by her grandmother after her parents separated. She was a voracious consumer of television and film from childhood, recognizing, even as a young person, that the stories being told on screen did not include people who looked like her, loved like her, or lived like her. That absence became the engine of everything she would later create. She moved to Los Angeles in her early 20s without connections, without industry relationships, and without a safety net. She worked as a production assistant, a development assistant, and a writer's room assistant, absorbing the mechanics of the industry while quietly developing her own voice. The industry's initial response to that voice was predictable, too specific, too niche, too rooted in the particularity of Black queer urban experience to travel beyond its immediate audience. Her acting role as Denise in Aziz Ansari's Master of None on Netflix gave her a platform, but it was what she did with a single episode that changed everything. The Thanksgiving episode of Season 2, which she wrote based on her own experience of coming out to her family over a series of Thanksgiving dinners, is now considered one of the finest single episodes of television of the 21st century. It won her the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing for a Comedy Series in 2017, making her the first Black woman to win that award in Emmy history. The award did not silence the skeptics. Some suggested it was a product of Hollywood's diversity momentum rather than exceptional craft. The response to that skepticism was Queen and Slim, 2019, a visually stunning, politically urgent road movie that she wrote and produced, directed by Melina Matsoukas. The film earned $41 million on a $20 million budget, and was praised by critics and scholars alike as one of the most important American films of the decade. She created, wrote, and produced 20s for BET, starring in it as well. She runs her own production company, Hillman Grad Productions. She has used her platform consistently to advocate for Black LGBTQ+ representation in media. Lena Waithe did not break a door down. She built a new one and left it wide open for every writer behind her who had been told their story was too specific to matter. Every story is specific. That is precisely what makes it universal. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone ever told you to sit down, be quiet, or know your place, this video is for you. Watch until the very last name, because number one on this list will hit different than you expect. And if these stories move you the way they moved us, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. Because at Black Excellence Legends, we don't just tell stories, we celebrate the people who refuse to let the world write their ending. Drop a in the comments if you're ready. Let's go.